Hello and welcome to this interactive forum. I'm Torin Douglas. In a little under 10 hours, Muggles will be settling down to read the latest Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. The pictures don't move and the text doesn't write itself, but the novel's already broken sales records around the world. You've been sending us your questions on the whole Harry Potter phenomenon, and here to answer them are Julia Eccleshare, author of A Guide to the Harry Potter Novels and founder of the Smarties Prize for Children's Literature, and Jamie Lawrence from the fan website MuggleNet.com. Now, I imagine both of you have been quite excited about all this. Have you been preparing for it in some way?
Well, I'm certainly very excited about it. I don't think I've been preparing for it, except I have set aside a lot of the weekend because I do want to read it, and I'm going to read it quite quickly.
But how long do you think it'll take you?
Well, I'm not a very fast reader, and I know it's a very big book, so it'll be slower than my children.
Yes. And Jamie?
I'm planning on about 4 hours for the entire book, hopefully, yeah.
And when are you going to start, do you reckon?
I think probably about 2 minutes past midnight.
Really?
Soon I get the book.
Just then go straight through.
Yeah.
Right, as I say, we've had lots of emails and text messages. This one's from Steve Hayward in the UK. I want to buy my copy of the book and start reading it as soon as I can, but I'm worried that major plot spoilers are going to start appearing all over the internet and on the news. Am I being too paranoid, or do you think this really could be a problem, that people are going to spoil the plot? Julia?
Yeah, I think it is a problem. I mean, I think what's an absolute miracle is that we've got to this point, this near the wire, and it's still pretty much a secret. And I think that's fantastically exciting and a major triumph from everybody who's been involved to part. But of course, it is going to be terrible if you're going to know who's died, as we know somebody's going to have died, before you get there. I think that will take away from the pleasure for some children.
Now, what about MuggleNet.com? Is it your job to spoil everybody's surprise?
Well, we've kind of done it, kept a spoiler-free site. We sort of made all the areas of it. You know, you have to highlight text to view any spoilers that we have put on there. But basically, if you don't want to see any spoilers, you have to keep off the internet. Because, you know, they are bound to arise somewhere.
Yeah. And the media, do you think newspapers will do it? I mean, broadcasters, what do you expect?
Well, I think the difficulty is if it's anywhere on radio or TV, it's almost impossible to avoid it. It's fine on the net. Yeah. But, I mean, if somebody just mentions it on a radio program or whatever, it is going to spoil it. However, I mean, let's get real about this book. It's not just what happens next in the sense of the sort of major incidents that matters. The cleverness about J.K. Rowling is the way that she structures the books and the way that she writes them. So that there's been lots of detail that we'll want to find out about, and lots of sort of finding out about how Harry's developed. I mean, she says he's getting crosser and angrier and more adolescent, and I think we'd all want to know how that comes over in print. So there'll be a lot of fun, even if you did know the big news.
Now, we've got two questions linked to that. John Murphy from the UK says, as you've raised, who is expected to die in the new Harry Potter book? And Philip Lickley from the United Kingdom questions, is it Hagrid that's likely to be killed off? Because Robbie Coltrane once mentioned he's only been put down for 5 films. Now, already we're moving into the speculation. How do you answer people like that, Julia?
Well, I have to say, I'm not a predictive reader anyway, so I never sit down in a book and think, what's going to happen next? You know, I'm always totally in the hands of the author who leads me, along. And I think, in this case, I'm not even prepared to hazard a guess about who's going to die. I mean, a lot of children I've spoken to think it's going to be either Hermione or Ginny Weasley, but I pointed out there are only 2 really strong female characters, and I don't think J.K. Rowling's likely to kill off one of them. So I don't think it'll be one of them. And I don't think it'll be Hagrid. I think he's too central to the drama.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't think it's going to be Hagrid.
Do you?
I think we've been told that it won't be Ron or Hermione, at least not now, in this book. But it's supposed to be a very big death, and she hated writing it. So
she cried.
Yeah, she cried, and then...
Julia, this connects up with something you said. This is from Ratch in Keighley in the UK. Do you think as the books continue, they get darker and more dramatic as the story progresses?
Well, interestingly, I think number 3, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, is about as dark as you can get, because in that, Harry really confronts his parents' death and what happened to them and his feelings about his parents. And I'm not sure that in terms of sort of internal grief, you can go much further than that. I don't think Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire was more dark than the Prisoner of Azkaban, so I'm sort of open to this one. I'm not quite sure. I mean, again, J.K. has said that Harry gets angrier, there will be more strong emotions around, but I'm not sure it can get much darker.
I think we are going to see a different side to Harry in Book 5. I mean, it was like in the Chamber of Secrets, every single person who saw the basilisk only got petrified. Nobody died, so she was kind of setting us up for a more grisly side of Harry in the future books. And obviously, we saw that in The Prisoner of Azkaban, but I think we will see it more in The Order of the Phoenix.
But we start from such a very high grisly point in the sense that there's Harry who's only miraculously saved from the moment of his birth.
That's very true.
So, in a way, it's not really getting darker. We just have forgotten how dark the origins of the stories can be.
That is true. Fiona from Aberdeen asks, why are the books so popular? She says it's not exactly groundbreaking storytelling. But Jamie, what do you think?
I think it's just how it's so different from everything else, and how they sort of tie the wizarding world in with the Muggle world. You know, you've got all the different issues. You've got the magic on its own. You've got Quidditch, you know, the game on broomsticks. But then you've also got the sort of social issues of it, like when Voldemort was in power, how many people were being controlled by the Imperius Curse. So it kind of links in magic with everyday issues and kind of brings it together in a fantastic story.
Julie?
Well, I think that's right, but I think the crucial difference about what she does in the books compared to what other people do is the closeness of the magic and the everyday, so that we can all, I mean, one of my favourite bits is the way that when all the conversation about Quidditch is exactly like conversation about football or anybody else's passion. You know, he gets the best, the super model, it's like cars or anything else, and it's so close, and yet it's got that twist in it. That's a very clever thing to do, and it means she's not just going off in some sort of airy-fairy invention of her own. She's using something we all know and then just twisting it. And exactly the same is true with the school story setting. School stories traditionally have been very popular in children's books, but hers is like a very familiar school story, but just turned into something amazingly extraordinary.
And of course there was the World Cup, wasn't there? So you were then building on that whole phenomenon.
Yes, and anybody who sort of entered into it, or you didn't even have to know much about the World Cup to feel so comfortable with everything she was creating, and then surprised because she took it to a new dimension.
We've got another live email here from Kelly in the United Kingdom, Kelly Ryder. A lot of people are now attacking the Harry Potter series as overrated and just nonsense. Do you agree with them? Well, I don't think you do. But do you think the series is a useful tool in encouraging to read? Which side?
It's more than a useful tool to encouraging children to read. Children who have not traditionally thought of themselves as readers now are reading Harry Potter. And yes, it is perfectly true that Harry Potter takes up a very large part of the children's book market, but it is encouraging children to read. Once you've read one book, you're more likely to read another book. It's encouraging children to think that reading is cool and that it's something they want to talk about. You hear conversations about Harry Potter between parents and children, between children and children. Waiting at bus stops, you hear people talking about what happened in the children's book. Tell me when that ever happened before.
And Jamie, it's boys. I mean, that was one of the phenomena that boys started to read from these books.
Yeah, I think it's happened with everybody. You know, they are just the most amazing series of books. I mean, you know, they've taken all the prizes for the book market, and people have just started lapping up all of the merchandise as well, and it's just brought in a whole new world of Harry Potter.
It doesn't mean there aren't other wonderful children's books. I mean, and I think the thing that we forget is that though we talk a lot about Harry Potter, actually there is a lot of other reading going on as well. But it seems a shame that we should sort of criticise Harry Potter for being too successul.
I mean, you having invented the Smarties Prize, I mean, this must have come as a huge sort of...
Well, what was very interesting, I mean, we take great pride in the Smarties Prize, that what happens is that the adult judges choose 3 books and then put them to a group of children. J.K. Rowling was a complete unknown, and we read this book and we thought it was a very good book, and we put it to the children, and they chose it as the gold medal winner. Children chose that book because they loved it so much. But we'd recognise its quality as well. And, I think it has done a very good thing for children and children's reading.
We've got another one here from somebody who calls themselves Mole in Newcastle. The Harry Potter phenomenon is now so much bigger than J.K. Rowling ever intended. Do you think it's possible for anyone, including her, to live up to the huge expectations now put on it, Jamie?
Well, we didn't know about Harry Potter before it came out, so yeah, we just can't tell what's going to come out next. But I think she can definitely, sort of keep going with Harry Potter. And I mean, every single book that she writes is going to be brilliant to all the fans. I mean, even if other people who are just, normal, casual readers of Harry Potter don't really like it as much as the others, I think every single hardcore fan is just going to like it all.
Yes, I mean, whether it can live up to it is a difficult question, because of course it can't, in a sense. I mean, just like, is it worth it? Of course, in one sense, no book series can be worth the amount of money it is compared to all the other books, if you know what I mean. But on the other hand, I think I'm agreeing exactly with Jamie. I think for her fans, she has kept very, very steadfast and true. And she has never, I think it's a great tribute to her, that she has never, despite the fact that the books moved from being, as it were, simple children's books into being a phenomenon for all readers, she didn't change how she writes. So in Goblet of Fire, she's not writing with an eye to adult readers. She's still keeping true to her original audience. I think that's great credit to her, and that's why the fans will go on reading them.
A linked question from Judith Wild in Hungary. I really like the adventures of this young wizard, but I think the whole fuss around the new Harry Potter book makes it a simple marketing product. And there has, as we know, been an absolute fury all over the world about it. What do you think? Have the marketing people taken over?
Yes, of course they have, but that doesn't take away from the book at its core, and this is what Rowling says herself. You know, she writes the books, and that's what matters to her. She can't be responsible for the fact that the rest of the world has gone mad about it as something that you can market very successfully. For her, what matters is the books and the readers and the interaction between them. And I think she's all right. I mean, I think she's remained firm on that. And it's like everything else. I mean, it's like with David Beckham. Is he a good footballer or is he only a media star? You can't criticize the person for what they do just because the media then picks up on it.
No, I think that's a very good point. And she also said in the interview this week that actually she didn't really want any of the merchandising, but in the days when the film started, she didn't have the power to stop it.
You know, she was the author. And I mean, it is a well-known fact for creators of things that they do get taken out of your control. If we don't like the marketing of it, you know, in a sense, that's a big question about marketing and how things are promoted. But the fact of the matter is that that's not her fault.
Now, as part of this whole marketing business, booksellers are selling it at cut price. And Andy James from Durham says, many big chain bookshops are selling this book at a loss. Independent bookshops and smaller authors can't compete. Is Harry Potter ruining the children's books market, Julie?
Well, I don't think it is ruining the children's book market. I think it's a very specific issue about this book, partly because Waterstones were selling it at half price from the very beginning. That is a problem, but I do think, in a way, it's rather looking a gift horse in the mouth. Have we ever had a book printed, you know, over 2 million copies printed in England? No, we never have. And surely we ought to be grateful. You know, we're always worrying about how many people read. Here we've got this huge market. Everybody's suddenly reading. I think it's a bit mingy to start then fussing about whether it's cutting out the independent children's bookshops. I think one has to think that Harry Potter, Jacqueline Wilson, Philip Pullman, all the big names in children's books at the moment have done a powerful good for children's books, even if it may cause some new marketing dilemmas or some new selling dilemmas which hadn't been thought of before.
And Jamie, I mean, the internet is obviously part of this in that they've been selling it on the internet cheap as well, haven't they?
I think that's just bound to happen with these kind of books. I mean, it is the fans that bring about these changes. And I mean, online bookshops do have the ability to sell at a cut-down price, you know, considering they aren't paying all the overheads of trading from a high street store, so they can, you know, people can pre-order on sites like Amazon.co.uk, and they can pre-order, and then it will arrive to them on the day, so they can save going to a party if they want to.
Now, what's boosted the success of the books? The books were successful, but then the films came along and just added so much more to the whole phenomenon. And we've got a question here from Yusuf Barakula in Manchester. Why are the film versions so popular when they're nowhere near as good as the books?
Well, I think I'd take issue with that. Not about them not being as good. I think they're not nearly as good, but I think actually the success of the books was enormous long before. Wouldn't you agree with that? That it was enormous long before the films came along. You know, I think the books were where they were. I mean, it is surprising to me that, in fact, that there were more sales of the books after the films, because I thought everybody had already got their copies. But yes, I mean, the film perhaps added some incremental sales, but the as it were, profound success of the books, what caused the uprise of websites and the kind of work you've been doing on it, all was there from the books, nothing to do with the film.
Yeah, and I think the films, I mean, every time something's transferred into a film, it is going to bring, you know, a tiny bit of extra magic, you know, to the book, because you can see what's happening, and it sort of adds to your own interpretation of the book.
Yes, and it is wonderful that with all the computer graphics and so on, you can actually get some of the effects that you would not have been able to get at.
But I mean, what's so odd that we're saying this and, you know, being critical about it, but actually if you take The Lord of the Rings, which admittedly had a much longer life run before it turned into a film. I was talking with a group of children yesterday and they were reading Lord of the Rings. Why? Because they'd seen the film, and nobody criticises that. Nobody sort of thinks we shouldn't have, you know, the film is in a way confusing the issue. We have to be grateful, even if it's, you know, a different thing that the film's success, that it is then taking children to reading.
And we've got Chris Kennan from Northern Ireland who's saying, I began reading the books following the publicity surrounding the first movie. Do you think the movies have played any part in ensuring the success of the Potter books?
No, because they were successful before. I mean, I think they're an add-on. I think the books would have kept their place without the films.
Mm-hmm. We've got one from Arizona here in the States, Hannah in Arizona. Who will play Dumbledore now that the actor is dead? Jamie, that's one for you.
His name is Michael Gambon, and he should be at Waterstones tonight, which we've had confirmed.
Oh, really? Because Richard Harris sadly died.
Yeah, very tragic.
Yeah. Michael Gambon is a wonderful actor. Yeah, I think he'll be a very, I'm looking forward to seeing him do Dumbledore.
He's not a well-known star. I mean, people recognise him in lots of good sort of dramas and so on, but he's not a big figure in the way that Richard Harris.
He's a sort of TV and theatre star, isn't he? Not a film star.
That's right, exactly.
But he soon will.
Well, he soon will be, indeed. No, absolutely right. And Peter Bouge from the UK, do you think that the current interest in the supernatural and the abandonment of Christian values is one of the reasons for the popularity of Harry Potter? The supernatural and the abandonment of Christian values, there's a heavy one.
Well, I think that's sort of throwing a bit much at poor old Harry, isn't it? I mean, let's face it, this is a simple school story with a bit of wizardry thrown in. I don't think it's got, I mean, I think it has got deep issues, and I think part of its strength is the deep issues about family and where you come from and belonging and identity and all of those things, but I don't think it's really got a lot to do with Christianity and supernatural.
And I wouldn't say they've abandoned them at all. I'd say they're encouraging them and exploring them, especially in the latest book. They're going to really especially taking into account Harry's feelings, which should be really...
Dave in Bristol here is just saying, why are the books so popular in the light of the reduction in innocence of the average modern child? Perhaps it's because there are so many other things that aren't innocent. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's got a lot to do with it. I think this is a very... it's very wholesome, and I think part of people's worries about children at the moment is that childhood is not quite as wholesome as it once was. And I think the appeal... I mean, all I know is that, as I say, with the Smarties Prize, the children themselves loved it. There was something about Harry as a kind of perfect, the perfect storybook character comes from adversity to triumph through his own inner strength and a little bit of magic as well, in a situation which is quite like their own in that he's at school, but it's a particular kind of school with the magic and the boarding school. And I think children just responded to that. And I think he does play into the idea of childhood innocence, and maybe that's why adults like it so much, because it gives a vision. I think the books have had quite a powerful effect in changing people's attitude to children and childhood, because whereas traditionally, up to that point, in recent years, children have been seen as rather brattish and disagreeable and badly behaved and yobbish and, Kevin off the telly and all of that, suddenly we were presented with a delightful child with, friends who were equally delightful. And okay, this is a story, and okay, perhaps it's a bit too golden, but it did give a very good redress to the image of children and childhood.
That's interesting. Alana from New Zealand, almost linked, says, why hasn't the story, and she doesn't say this, but so far, have any love scenes? Why no love scenes?
Well, I think it was originally written for children, and although it is a book to be enjoyed by all ages, I think they have to remember that the main market is for children. They can't have anything too strong in there.
We have had a few love scenes.
I was going to say, in the last
Goblet
book,
of Fire, there was Hagrid.
Yeah,
I mean, Hagrid fancying Madame Maxine rather rashly, and certainly some of the sort of stuff with the students from... Yeah, exactly. Yes, I think love has sort of been in the air.
Perhaps they haven't quite got to New Zealand yet, but anyway. And I'm afraid this is our final email from Karen Bryan in Grimsby in the UK. Are you disappointed that J.K. Rowling says that there are only going to be 7 books? Would you like to know what happens to Harry, Hermione and Ron when they leave school? Jamie?
I think she is going to tell us what's going to happen, but I'm not so sure we're going to like it.
Really? And in the 7th book, or
in the 7th book, I think everything's going to come to a climactic finish, and we're just going to find out what's happening to all of them.
Really? Oh, well.
Or she might write on it afterwards, but I'm not sure.
I don't think she'll write on afterwards. She's been absolutely clear that she sort of thought of it as a 7-book series. It's a very ambitious thing for any writer to do, to age a child. That's practically unheard of in children's books. I mean, they nearly always stay where they were, and that keeps the core reader. So I think she had a ridiculously ambitious trajectory when she started, and I think it's fantastic that she's fulfilled it, and I think she will finish it off in such a way that we are satisfied.
But of course they're getting longer, aren't they? I think when the last one was as long as it was, we thought that was because she didn't have time to cut it, but obviously not. This time she's had all the time she wanted, and she's made it even longer.
She's got a lot to say.
Indeed. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thanks to my guests, Julia Eccleshare and Jamie Lawrence, and thanks to all of you for sending in your emails and texts. Don't forget you can watch this forum or any of our previous ones by going to www.bbc.co.uk/talkingpoint. But for now, from me, Torin Douglas, and the rest of the team, goodbye.